My name again is Vinay. As if you were here in the morning, I had a business called Bridge to India. We are a consulting company focusing on the renewable sector. We've got a great panel with us to discuss this. I will let each panelist introduce themselves shortly. But let me just kind of quickly introduce the topic. We know that there is a bit of a power crisis in India right now. Demand growth has spurted over the last year or so. Peak demand yesterday touched about 210 gigawatt, which apparently is an all-time high. I didn't know that until this morning. But interestingly and slightly worryingly, if I may say so, all the discussions that we see in the popular press, the discussion within the government circles, etc., the policy direction, everywhere we see the attempt seems to be, should we revive the coal cycle? How do we ramp up the coal production? We need to import more coal. We need to allow discoms to increase the tariffs, etc., etc. And I have to say that as a renewable energy proponent, that is very disappointing. Nowhere do we see a discussion that actually, we need to be doing much more to make renewable power more dispatchable. What are the other solutions that are required? We know that for sure discoms the heat has gone off standalone vanilla solar and wind. Despite the power demand shooting up, even today as we speak, discoms are not coming forward to buy solar and wind. I know the government has been talking about RTC and peak power tenders and some of these other fancy solutions for quite some time, but the uptake has been quite slow. In fact, I believe the peak power tender, the auction for which was completed 2 years ago, I believe it has still not been fully contracted yet. So I think it is something that the industry needs to kind of really come back to and take it up in real earnestness to find real solutions, because there is no doubt that the growth of renewable sector is contingent in a very large manner upon addressing this intermittency issue and making sure that it actually helps in meeting the peak power demand and not just the base load demand or other time factors, etc. So I will start from Sai. So I will request each panelist to introduce themselves in about a minute, and then we will start the discussion from there. Sai?
More specifically, we try to provide high-end, high efficiency, high power density, high energy density kind of technologies across the globe, which is how Jinko got popular across the globe. So that's where we will be much more interested in meeting the demands of our country in that particular segment.
Hello everyone, I'm Modini. I'm working as senior consultant with DNV. I've started my career off in thermal power plants, and then I moved into renewables, and right now I'm providing solutions for energy storage in India and in the wider region of Asia Pacific countries.
Dubey, Market Application Manager in Fluence, a battery energy storage provider, a global leader in its reference. In my role, as Modini already said that she has transformed from thermal to renewables, same as in my case, because from where we start our careers, it was purely thermal dominated industry. And now as we transforming towards renewable, everyone has got their opportunities to move forward and contribute their bit towards the net zero emissions.
Let's see. We need to do this now or later.
Check. All right, great. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Siddharth Malik. I head the energy transition business for Azure Power. Azure is a listed renewable energy developer, one of the largest in the country. And the energy transition business focuses on helping commercial and industrial customers go through that complete fossil to 100% green and clean transition. So happy to be here and deliberate on topics of much importance.
Hi, good afternoon. I am 𝗨𝗃𝗀𝗍𝗂𝗃, Vice President, Business Development, IEX. IEX stands for Indian Energy Exchange. It's an online trading platform. For those of you who are not aware, it's similar to any other commodity exchange, but there, whether it's commodities or stocks that gets traded, it's IEX, here energy and electricity gets traded. So happy to be part of this. I will talk about the segments when I get the opportunity later.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, everyone. We have Sanskriti with us from Fluence. So Sanskriti is going to make a small presentation touching up some of the key aspects about storage and how storage can help provide some solutions. So over to you, Sanskriti.
We power your world and to make it a more sustainable future. As of now, Fluence is globally located in all over the world with 4.8 gigawatt installed in 30 plus countries with 185 projects already. In Asia Pacific region, we have already been present in Australia, Singapore, Philippines, India, and Taiwan is our new market. So coming forward with the topic of today, I would like to start with what we already have today. As of now, we have installed capacity of 395 gigawatt with a renewable energy penetration of 27%. And we will be heading to 817 gigawatt with a renewable energy penetration of 52% by 2030. So what does this require? This requires the grid to be more flexible to adopt the renewables. When we talk about meeting the peak demand through renewables, there's a data over here of last 6 years which projects how the peak demand is increasing. And as we talk, we have already surpassed the last year peak demand by 210 gigawatt. And as of now, we have not even touched the peak demand season, which is known as July and August for the northern region. So how to mitigate that? And this peak demand is going to reach 300 gigawatt by 2030. So what do we need more to the system? As of now, we have lot of base load capacity, and as the demand is already increasing, the growing daily need does not require investment in excess base load thermal capacity. Rather, we need this electronical solution which offers flexibility and dynamic generation solutions. So what is the response over here? I guess energy storage is the solution. Energy storage allows a large amount of renewable to be available beyond the solar and wind hours. We need to build a system that is able to manage certainty. From the traditional operation of certainty, we need to move to a new operation which is known as flexibility. Now, I would like to touch upon a topic on how to utilize energy storage just to meet the peak demand. This is a typical day load profile for the evening load requirement from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. As we see, the load requirement can be met for a 4-hour duration with the base load capacity, and then for any peaking requirement for 1 or 2 hours, we need peaking assets which can respond to 1 or 2 hour durations. Traditionally, everyone believes that energy storage can be operated as an energy resources. Rather, we need to think energy storage as a peaking resources. So just to focus, when we say that in the last 3 months the peaking demand has been increased, this is the data from the energy exchange in the last 3 months, comparing this data with the previous year 2021 and the prices which it reflected in this year. The highest tariff which we got was rupees 20. And this doesn't happen for a day or two, this happened for a considerable time period, and when CRC has to step in and cap the tariff to rupees 12. So, how to mitigate this high tariffs? Energy storage provides a hedging mechanism through which you can mitigate or hedge your prices in the exchange. Now, as we move forward, in the introductory remark, Vinay has already said that we already have a traditional mentality of thinking to increase more and more thermal power over here. Rather, I would suggest DISCOMs to think about how storage can be deployed to meet this peaking demand, to make the peaking demand more viable. Now, when we talk about storage, I would also like to touch upon the tenders which we already have in the market and how to evaluate storage. We have a traditional mentality of evaluating storage with the project tariff of rupees per unit, the asset cost. Rather, energy storage should be evaluated on the basis of avoided cost, on the cost, the 20 rupees avoidance cost in the DISCOMs. At this point of time, DISCOMs are ready to pay 20 rupees to buy power from exchange, but rather would not be comfortable to move to procure from tenders like peak power or RTC, which is already successful. The peak power tender is successful, the reason being they provided average levelized tariff lesser than the levelized tariff of thermals. So we need to repeat more of such successful tender, and we need DISCOMs to be free with the mentality that energy storage is the new asset into the grid, and we need to adopt that. Just a bit to touch upon ancillary service market as well. So when we talk about creating energy storage, we need to talk more about creating a value stream over here. And ancillary services is by default a first technology and application a battery energy storage can access because of its inherent technical capability. So any market globally which has adopted battery energy storage has started with ancillary service application. Unfortunately, we don't have that market as of now. The second would be the declination of energy storage market results in market to be becoming more mature. We have more sort of wholesale market and balanced market over here, capacity market over here. So as the market becomes more mature, there's a mix of revenue stream. So you see the last left line is the ancillary service market which a battery energy storage can earn revenue from, and the rightmost bar results in the market to be more mature. The lesser ancillary service market participation followed by a mix of balanced capacity, wholesale market and capacity market stacked in. This is the thing which we need to create for becoming energy storage to be more viable and sustainable as of now, and to provide more of this renewable power into the grid with a mix of solar, wind and other renewable technologies. Thank you.
For storage market, I thought in a country like India, it should be the other revenue streams which open up first, like load following or renewable power generation, smoothing and other things. Is that, how do you see that, and how do you see a revenue stack building up for storage?
So definitely, when we talk about ancillary services, voltage regulations and power smoothing also comes as a part of applications over here. So we have been hearing from CRC that they are working on various technologies to make it part of the ancillary service application along with whatever we have in the secondary market. And POSOCO at this point of time is already evaluating how voltage regulation can be inbuilt into the CRC ancillary services regulation. But when we talk about India, I surely see fast frequency response is also one of the main value stream where energy storage can provide. And we don't have a pay for performance mechanism as of now. And that is what is going to drive the market if we already have it as of now.
Thank you. Let's turn to you, Siddharth, to get some developer insights, bring the market back, what is required to get it started, both at the utility level, if you can, and also at the CNI consumer level, because many more consumers at the corporate end also are beginning to say that plain vanilla solar and wind kind of doesn't meet their needs anymore. They need a load following renewable power profile or a peak power solution, etc. So, you know, what are you seeing in the marketplace, and what kind of solutions are you able to offer to the customers based on what's available in the market, particularly noting that the costs have really kind of turned the whole world upside down in the last 1 year. Costs have been volatile. There are supply chain challenges even in the storage market, as we see on the solar side. Over to you, Siddharth.
Thanks, Vinay. A lot of questions there, right? Let me try to split them into two parts. The utility and the CNI segment. Vinay is absolutely right. 51% of the total power consumption is actually done by C&I sector in this country, right? So that's a staggering number. And if we are to ever achieve the decarbonization goals set out for ourselves, 2070 or even further down, or if earlier, if better, one thing is clear, that this 51% energy consumption base, which is C&I sector, has to go through a complete what we call as cleaning and greening, right? From their fossil-based current sources. So in that space, Vinay, since you asked, yes, there is a tremendous amount of traction which we are seeing in the market because C&I customers are actually coming forward, which fall into two large buckets. One, there is a cost arbitrage. So the landed cost of renewable electricity today absolutely is much lesser in most cases, practically in almost all cases, reference to the DISCOM tariff. So there are fundamental savings which is pushing the whole open access market as we all understand it, right? So that's the economic driver for it. The second aspect of consumers fall into the sustainability bucket, right? Not to say they're not economically sensitive, but their drivers are more their commitments to their shareholders for RE100, their own internal net zero goals, and their understanding of this or their drivers are slightly different, right? Both these categories are coming forward more so than ever across the length and the breadth of the country to actually adopt renewable power through bilateral contracts, right? So exchange, of course, that's one roadmap to kind of procure green power, and through the advanced market that I'm sure Ravi will talk more about. But the idea of doing bilateral contracts added on with flexible terms and conditions. So probably gone are the days of the 25-year contracts, right? People want 10-year contracts, they want flexible contracts, they want no early termination fees. So think of it like a hop on, hop off, right? You can get in anytime, you can get out anytime. I think all these new innovations coming into the sector, of course, pose a challenge for a developer. But that being said, I think is very interesting for the market overall, right? It creates more flexibility, it creates choices in the market, and any market that is driven by choice, I think is heading towards the developing to a developed kind of a transition, right? Last bit, both these set categories of customers, Vinay, to your third question, are demanding renewable energy not as and when it's available, but when they require it, right? So when they need it. In other words, the load following, right? So if my load falls during certain parts of the day, weeks, months and year, they want the renewable energy to follow the load curve. Those solutions are not impossible. We are actually building them out. They are typically achieved by a very thoughtful combination of solar, wind hybrids, co-located, or maybe not even co-located, right? Both maybe connected to ISTS. Combined with certain elements of storage that Sanskriti briefed us on. And I think this combination of solar, wind, hybrid plus storage creates a very interesting mechanism to allow what is called load following. That's one. The second is what is called peak power, right? So of course there are certain hours of the year in our country where the prices shoot up simply because we're all turning on an air conditions all at the same time, so on and so forth. And that time there is an arbitrage in the market where the peak and the off-peak, there is enough delta for a renewable energy solution to make sense. The third and the last category is what is called abbreviated as RTC power or round-the-clock power. All it is basically, today I'm relying on my captive power plant, could be a CPP for a smelter, for a steel mill, and they cannot tolerate energy as and when it's available to them because the CPP cannot swing back and forth, right, along the load profile. What they are interested in is flip the switch for their CPPs to off and go 100% reliance on green energy. That is a tougher problem to solve, but of course we have friends such as Jinko who have actually taken the baton and actually pushing pumped hydro kind of solutions, long duration energy storage, LDES, which will actually make that happen for our country. So I think to summarize a short question and a long answer, I think exciting times, enough happening in the sector from a consumer perspective, from regulation and the solution engineering that we are seeing becoming more and more relevant in the sector now.
Thank you, Siddharth. Let me come to you, Modini. So Siddharth mentioned that some of these tenders we've seen, solar peak power, RTC, etc. What do you think are the range of technology solutions to meet some of these peak power and RTC solutions? Greenko is doing pumped hydro storage. There's lithium ion. Can you just talk us through different combinations to help address some of these challenges?
Sure. So storage, of course, is a necessary and the viable solution that's rightly available.
Right.
Pumped hydro is one of them.
Yeah.
Battery storage is another. There are also some of the reserves, but not just in India, but we have seen in APAC where geothermal kind of reserves are also acting for balancing the requirements that are needed. So, I mean, right now, if you ask me, yes, the game is all about storage, and with that, we can have much more balance in the systems.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit more about techno-commercial viability of these systems? I know that if you compare it with the grid power prices today, particularly on the exchanges, it all seems very attractive, but generally on a long-term basis, what does the techno-commercial viability look like?
Sure. So, if we have to start the journey of how storage has made, right? Batteries have made inroads with solar in many markets in developed economies like US. And they are continuing to do that. And if we talk somewhere about 2030, right, I would see that the battery-based solution along with PV penetration is the viable one. We can have the components of wind as well into it. Because if we look directly on the cost game, right? Cost game is won by renewables, and by 2030 they are going to be there. So instead of someone actually installing a thermal power plant from start, they would be rather going for a renewable energy solution for back then. So yeah.
Right. Okay. And anything about the economic viability? Do you think that is that likely to improve going forward, or are we seeing an era where storage prices already now peaking over the last 2 years are expected to remain high, or should they, according to you, start coming down again soon?
So there is a divided opinion in the market as well, but then the experts who have been studying the costs that are happening around the batteries and the storage solutions, they have mentioned that it is likely to plateau by around 2025, 26, and then on the economic side. So, I mean, this is how, again, it is again driven by the stronger learning curves, stronger ecosystem, stronger grid balancing, or the supply that is going to be there going forward.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Modini. Now, I think, Siddharth, you were the one who said that actually the system needs more flexibility. And there are various solutions to addressing this problem of matching renewable power profile with the load curve, which are not just entirely hardware driven, not just dependent on storage and other techniques. For example, one of the things that we can deploy very well is demand side management. Why can't the load follow the renewable power output profile? There can also be greater reliance on market instruments to release some of the pressure on the grid and the time of the day based pricing. And that is where I want to bring Ravi into the discussion. And interestingly, now CRC has allowed longer term instruments as well. So how can the market forces play a big role in this? Sanskriti mentioned that the discoms prefer to go to the market to buy power rather than buy storage, rather than commit to a long-term storage use. And what are the different kind of instruments that are already there today or can be potentially there in future which can help meeting some of these requirements?
Thanks, Vinay. First, I would like to talk about that last point which you mentioned, that discoms prefer taking power from exchange. So there are currently 2 exchanges in the country, and exchange share, if anyone can take a guess, I think you would have seen it. Exchanges have been around for, I think, 14 years, both exchanges. So the exchange share in the total Indian power market is around 7%. So with all the preference we are getting, that's the share which we are talking about. 85-90% of the contracts happen in the long term. So the same thing which we are mentioning, that fixed, rigid, you cannot walk out of it, there are take or pay obligations, there are so many disputes, we need not mention about it. So discoms come to exchange, but I'm only talking about discoms, and since there is no one else from discom side, so I'm just, please remember that I'm from IEX and I'm actually heading the green markets there, so, but please take it with a pinch of salt when I'm saying I want to talk on the discom side. Why do discoms come to exchange? Why do they come? One, as a last resort, when I'm saying as a last resort, it may be because of improper planning, it may be a reason, but there are so many exigencies which do happen. It's easier for us to criticize, but once we sit in the hot seat, it's really getting difficult for them, because either they don't have tools or financial resources or lack of manpower, n number of reasons. So that is one reason why discoms procure. Second, they try to optimize. So majority of the procurement that happens in exchanges is actually to optimize their cost. So although the 20 rupees and 12 rupees do get highlighted, exchange IEX data is in public domain. So after 14 years, for example, even prior to this year, in the COVID year, the average price is 2.82. And even the FY22, we had seen 2 month spikes in the October second half, in October first half and the March second half. Even post the spike, the average price discovered in exchanges 4 point or something. That's the average price. So just I thought that I will just correct a couple of opinions about that. And CRC has capped it after a issuance of circular by ministry that seeing these high prices. But now again the price have come not probably to the same levels at 3 rupees, 4 rupees, but now they are hovering around 6 rupees, 5 and 6 rupees. The key concern in the pricing and the key concern in the viability. So the reason why I explained all these stories, if discoms were to again enter into any kind of long-term agreements, again probably all these things will play in their mind. So that's where the importance of flexible and all these contracts will come into place. That's my 2 cents about it. So yeah, coming back to on the IEX side, yeah, we have launched couple of markets exclusively for green power. So most of you are aware. There is a green term ahead market. We have launched it successfully. It's been now almost 1.5 August 20. So now it's almost 1 year and 8 months. When we have launched this market, there was no merchant capacity per se. Whatever capacity was there, actually except a couple of developers, there is no merchant capacity. It's only with the confidence that if there is a market segment, there will be availability, there will be supply and demand. That's the confidence, and the market segment has performed so well that with the guidance and support of ministry and regulator, we launched another market segment called GDAM. If you are interested, I can talk about it, but it will be slightly elaborate to talk about both these market segments. Suffice to say that DAM means for the next day, TAM means for currently the TAM market is up to 11 days. So now with the coming of this longer duration contracts, the exchanges will be in a position to offer contracts up to 1 year. So there is a long jurisdiction issue between CRC and SEBI which got resolved. Now we will hopefully see futures also coming with other commodity exchanges launching it. But on the physical delivery side, we will see longer duration contracts. So that is also coming. So with all these market instruments in place, the biggest advantage which discoms and even the C&I customers can derive from this tool is that now they will get that dispatchable renewable power. So it may be because of, again, it's slightly early days because we haven't seen, we have seen the participation in generators in numbers, but in terms of volumes, it's still the discoms which have the ability to provide dispatchable green power because of their portfolio of assets. They could do that. For a generator to give
you mean discoms who have bought more renewable power than they need it?
Yeah, we can name them. It's Karnataka and Telangana. We have widely discussed. It's widely in the news media. So Karnataka is rich in solar, non-solar. Telangana is rich in solar. So yeah. So when they have already exceeded their targets, it's not necessary that they should exceed their RPO to participate in it, but it will be odd if they participate without exceeding their target. So when they are surplus, they can actually sell their green power. So that's how does that help discoms? They can get the revenue which they badly need immediately. As long as it makes commercial sense, they will get the revenue. And how does it help the customers? You are getting schedulable and dispatchable green power. So hopefully storage will definitely come into it. But I have one or two questions on storage. When I will let others speak, then I would like to understand that point on storage.
Sure, but I want to ask you one more question. Yeah. We've seen the more consumers want to increase the penetration of renewable power into the system, we've seen they tend to oversize the procurement size and they want to then sell the surplus on the exchange. Now, the risk with that is that you are selling your solar power. Usually the surplus is going to be in the case of solar power, and that power is going to be sold at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. But when the prices on the exchange are at probably the daytime lows, right, and the company then will have to buy power from alternate sources in the evening. So basically there is a time of the day price risk, which is also known as the basis price risk, and that is likely to get much worse as the share of renewable power increases in the grid. Is there any solution to that in your view, and how is that likely to play out?
Yeah, I think you already so that's the reason I think storage and others are being sought out. But as I said, as I think some of the developer friends whom I talk to also agree that probably the delta between the day prices or the night off-peak prices and the peak prices is still not coming. I was just before coming here, I was just doing a small Excel, seeing the last 5-6 years. You can do it by yourself. IEX data is in public domain. So I was just seeing the average prices for last 5-6 years, if the delta is significant, but it's not so much. I don't know if the viable single storage solution getting a 10 rupees delta, I don't know, it is 10 rupees, 12 rupees, 13 rupees, I don't know what's the price. Even with the $250, I presume, again, I'm not part of the earlier sessions, so that number is slightly difficult. But the solution which is probably workable is hybrid kind of thing, where you can sell the excess probably to a customer of Maharashtra, or there are a couple of pockets where the commercial tariff is so high, and if you can, I'm ignoring the non-tariff barriers of open access, let's not talk about that, but there is a viability case there. There are pockets where the cost is so high that it makes sense for them to set up probably the asset on this basis and sell that particular delta to those customers either on time of day or have a round the clock arrangements. But this is just my thought. There are so many thoughts which are floating around the market now.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ravi. Sai, we'll come to you. How do you think technology can contribute, can address some of these things? Are there any new module designs or project designs, technical designs, which can actually, flatten the generation profile, have more power production in the evening hours, for example?
Yeah, thanks, Vinay. As such, if you just try to look at the existing crystalline silicon technologies, they have the capability to absorb direct normal irradiance and diffused irradiance only during those particular peak times, which means, in a way, the kind of generation, whatever is happening, it's going to cater only for the T2, T3 time zones, which is more predominantly starting from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. So it's this particular bell curve is going to follow.
But is there a way that the bell curve can be flatter?
It can be flattened by just going with a kind of additional storage. So if we are trying to go with storage kind of option, and if these kind of options like if utility scale segment which is coming with the RTC kind of thing or hybrid kind of tenders, or even for the domestic segment, in the distributed segment also, if there exists an option like going with a kind of rooftop net meter, along with that, if storage is also going to be a kind of mandatory requirement, then definitely this can be flattened, and in a way it is going to reduce the kind of stress, whatever is going to happen on the nearby load centers is completely flattened down, and that way quality of the power can easily be bettered in such a way that a lot of possibilities can be achieved in that particular segment as well. Specific to PV.
But sorry, couldn't the use of trackers and suitable orientation of modules
Absolutely.
help slightly in that regard?
Absolutely. More predominantly from the fronts of bifacial technology. As of now, if we just try to see, the existing technologies generally try to go with a kind of fixed tilt monofacial kind of modules, which is generating, assuming that 1560 or 1600 kilowatt hours per megawatt peak as a kind of general assumption. The same thing, if we just try to go with a kind of bifacial, we easily can see 5 to 7% kind of gain on the same fixed tilt kind of mechanism. And if we try to go with tracker, single axis tracker kind of system from east to west, which is a new phenomena, but yes, with north-south kind of alignment, definitely we can flatten this by reducing the overloading percentage. So that is already there in the market, but eventually, if we just try to look at the continental markets or tropical zone kind of markets like India, where we could see that this is flattening up to a certain extent, but not to the complete extent. In a way, we can see that the steep, whichever is happening, assuming that if during this particular time zone of 9 a.m. till 3 p.m., if 70% is happening, if we just try to go with these kind of tracker kind of solution with bifacial, probably this 70% can become 75 to 80 or maximum 85 depending on the albedo factors of that particular zone. But again, this particular bell curve cannot be made as a kind of flat. But yes, that possibilities are there with the existing crystalline silicon technologies, which is what is there with TOPCon or HJT or upcoming technologies of integrated back contact kind of technologies. It can be done. But again, at the end of the day, it has to be a combination of a storage kind of thing. Definitely, it makes much more sense.
Thank you, Sai. This is obviously not a problem which is unique to India, Modini. I know that you do work in other countries. I would even say that storage is growing much faster in some of the other countries, both in Europe, US, and even in parts of Southeast Asia. What are the other different technology or tender designs which are taking off in these countries, helping the renewable power growth in the process?
So in Philippines, we have seen fixed shape PPA, where these actually have upticked the generation and the capacity building of renewables. And the other kind...
Sorry, can you please explain that? What does it actually mean?
So fixed shape PPA means that so there is a solar or renewables plus storage that's actually giving you straight the peak power requirement. So that
bit like RTC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, probably yes. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the cases I have seen. Secondly, there is actually inclusion of varying renewable energy, capacity in the interconnection agreements also. That also has motivated some of the system operators to actually go for renewable kind of solutions. And it's actually one sector which gets there is a bit of flexibility, or there is a bit of allowance that is given for renewables, which is actually cascaded to the different segments, and then finally people are taking up. And then there is also mostly in the island kind of regions, there is a decentralized grid mechanism, there is distributed energy resources, which is actually meeting up the power supply demand at each of these locations that are targeted for. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So Siddharth, I'll just come to you. Do you think we need a little bit of carrot and stick? Maybe to offer them some incentives, maybe to impose some targets? That I know that some countries are thinking of mandatory storage installation with every single megawatt of power, or to some such other mechanism to actually say that this is what we need going forward. If the market is not willing, then let the government decide for us.
It's an interesting way to look at it. Can we mandate something, right?
Yeah.
But I think, let me pick a cue out of Ravi's point actually, right? I think the reason why, in spite of the technological solution, the economics there, why DISCOMs would not come forward or choose not to come forward through this route, I'm sure, as Ravi said, there is a fundamental problem in the system, right? And I think to eliminate that, no kind of mandates, they may work in the short term just to kind of get things kick-started, but I don't think a mandate would go a long way in terms of solving the problem for them, right? Whatever their problem is, which as Ravi, probably he would have a little bit more insight into what they struggle with, right? Why do they do this, right? We will all need to work together to actually solve that problem for them. And if that problem indeed is they are not incentivized, to your point, Vinay, then maybe the solution is incentivize them, right? Incentivize them by a mechanism which incentivizes with the upside and penalizes on the downside. So if they do not achieve, then here's the sort of penalty on it. But if they do achieve and participate in that market, then here is the upside, a kicker for them, right? That's one way to look at it. But as I said, something tells me that there's something else going on that probably a whole lot of people on this stage may or may not understand. I'll put my bet on Ravi for that, right? So if, with your due permission, I'm going to pass it over to Ravi, right? Because I really want to hear this as well.
Yeah. But just on that, I do agree that mandate doesn't sound like a great word. It's not something that the government should be forcing by diktat. Let the market solution, the technology forces decide what is the most optimal solution. But we do know for sure that other countries are beginning to impose storage as a mandatory installation. They know that come what may, renewable is a volatile, intermittent, unpredictable source of power, and some amount of storage is desirable and better start now in incremental amounts than to build the problem to a point when there is no solution and you suddenly hit a wall. So countries, and I believe China is now thinking of, I don't know if somebody can support me, but China is now thinking about mandatory storage installation as part of every utility scale project. But anyway, before we come to that, over to Ravi.
Yeah. Thanks, Siddharth. So I would like to actually talk about green market. The example which I give probably will make you understand the exact problem. So we launched green markets. Ideally, markets are easier way, as at least the popular opinion is that discoms should immediately come flocking towards market. They have surplus. It took us good 7-8 months to even convince them to sell surplus. Why? There is no efficient way of predicting the renewable power. And even in the exchange, even when you have such a short-term commitment of 1 day, we have in intraday contracts. We have 2 days, 11 days, up to 70. We have a variety of contracts. Even for them, it's really difficult. And after so much of policy advocacy, so much of use cases, even still date, we only see Telangana and Karnataka. There are just 2 discoms who are actually able to utilize the market in a much better way. There are other renewable rich states which, in spite of so much advocacy, could not, because, as I said, for example, Karnataka has a rich hydro to help them smooth out in case their prediction goes flat, they have hydro to make good for it. The other renewable rich states may not have it. Or the difference between peak and off peak is so much between their demand that, and even in Telangana, one day we were just showing that just one monsoon, one particular day, that difference between off peak and peak within a day runs in thousands of megawatt. And in a windy state like Tamil Nadu, you will not even believe it will be 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 megawatt. I don't know. My experts in storage can tell me if that kind of solution can actually come with, which can guarantee that kind of. So there are other market-based tools or ancillary markets. There are so many things being thought about. So yeah, I thought this will give a good example. I would not like to quote the actual problem because there are other disincentives and incentives which will stop any mechanism to work. But yeah.
Just to add to Ravi's point, I believe, yes, certain provisions of adding storage for every tender will start the process in the right direction. But I think even before that, to Ravi's point, there's a lot to be done on the scheduling side as well, actually, frankly, right? Even before we get to storage, and storage is required, I think we're all eagerly awaiting for that 1,000 megawatt hour tender, right? But I think the ability to forecast and schedule wind particularly, solar is, I think, a much easier cookie, right? But the wind is so sporadic that until the point just uses as it comes is fine. But the minute you start trying to do these, give it to them when they need it, I think much better work needs to get done on the scheduling and forecasting of wind. And then I'm sure storage can also start kicking in, right?
Sure. Thanks, Siddharth. And what about long-term storage? I think we are mainly talking about lithium-ion, pumped hydro, which is all basically from 1 hour to maybe 5 hours, 4-5 hours, etc. Is there a long-term storage has a role to play? What are the other options that could be viable in the short to mid-term?
So I would just give you an example of how California started adopting energy storage over here. So California has mandated energy storage target, and they started with the ancillary services operation and then slowly moving from 1 hour, 2 hour to 4 hour duration, and now California is moving to a long durations. The reason being,
Sorry, can you also mention what the targets are?
so California is a very small state, so they have 1 gigawatt target to be met, storage target, energy storage target to be met for a particular duration, which they have already achieved. In a similar way, there are various states inside US which has 8 to 7 states which have already mandated a procurement target, storage procurement target to achieve energy storage into the grid. And when I was talking about long duration storage, so once having a sufficient revenue stream already built into the system, now California is moving towards the long duration storage. Now when we take this as a reference for India, we haven't even tried to see how 1 hour or 2 hour energy storage duration will perform in the grid. The only present operation storage asset we have is the 10 megawatt of Tata Power Delhi asset, and I guess somewhere in Andaman we have 8 megawatt and 20 megawatt asset as well. But we haven't functionally seen how energy storage performs as of now. So when we talk about long duration storage, yes, pumped hydro is definitely over there, but for the shorter duration, we should see how battery energy storage responds, how it can cater the fast frequency response which we need as of now. When Ravi was talking about, the sudden variation in wind, we already have an asset in Ireland which responds within 6 seconds. The very fast frequency response asset, and which caters the high variation in Ireland, the wind variation, and stores all the wind energy to be displaced later during the time. So such kind of technology, we should see how it performs as of now. And then once we are comfortable with such technology, we should move towards the long duration storage technologies.
Thanks, Sanskriti. So I just want to give all my panelists a chance to ask anybody else a question. Modini, do you want to ask any questions to any of the other panelists?
Yeah. So how about arbitrage market in India? What are your thoughts looking at the numbers or the crunches that's going on in the market so far? Where do you see the viability, and is there any improvisation that needs to be done?
When you are saying arbitrage, futures, derivatives kind of... Yeah. Again, we have just now started working towards it. CRC and SEBI, I think you know the jurisdictional issue now. As I said, when we are launching long duration contracts, now there is a joint working group which is going to start with. Some of them are confidential, I don't know how much I can share, but I think at least one aspect which I read somewhere in news, which I can openly say, is probably monthly kind of contracts is what they are thinking. But again, the settlement price and others are still under discussion. Most probably IEX settlement price or the weighted average of all the 2 or 3 exchanges, that will be used as a settlement price. So it is still in discussion. But if you are asking just my personal opinion, not from IEX perspective, I think it should work, it should help. But the biggest concern I will say, because I was party to a couple of earlier discussions, so there are big concerns that it will impact the volatility further. So for that I don't have an answer, because concerns are coming from a much better educated person than me on this market aspect. So the concern is mainly on that, whether it will impact further on the volatility. So that's just only my personal opinion. But anyhow, work is going on. We have to see how the market will be designed. So too early days to stage anything without even seeing what the draft regulation will be and the liquidity that will come. But what we have seen globally, some experiences or some presentations share that once these futures and others market come in, there is actual increase even in the market participation, normal market participation. There is some percolation. And one of the countries, I forgot the name, where I think it's UK market, we have seen almost 7 times increase in the participation in the future market within the span of 5-6 years. I mean, it grew up to 7x. It is actually 7 times the physical market. So that's the kind of volumes, because all of them will be cash settled, or most of them will be cash settled. So there, I'm presuming there is definitely a good opportunity, but we have to see, even first we have to see how the contracts will get structured there. Yeah.
Thank you.
So on the storage front, I have just one question. So what is the viability number which you are looking for it? Storage, dedicated storage number, any of you? Standalone.
So as I talk now, probably standalone would not make much sense. But when you talk about a hybrid contract along with solar and wind, it makes a lot of sense with the blended tariff. We have already seen that in the peak power tender. But we probably see the prices will fall down in next 6 to 8 months, and that is what we are hoping for. So, and then I would say that, you know, it is going to make a lot of sense. The other way around is, where I have already spoken about it, is not to evaluate it as an asset cost. Rather, you have to judge it with the way of what is the cost avoidance. Like, just for example, taking from your point, you mentioned that it took a lot of time to convince the DISCOM to sell the excess power in exchange, the green power in exchange, to earn revenue out of it. What if the same DISCOMs would have placed energy storage over there, charged the battery and sold it in the peaking prices time?
Yeah. The backdown cost of that particular thermal plant will be 3 rupees or 4 rupees. It wouldn't make sense. You need storage. I think for storage it will require 10 rupees as a standalone cost, right? They have to, so for that they need, that's the problem.
So that's what I'm saying. So you have to see the avoidance cost as well at this point of time, probably because we don't have a revenue stream.
Yeah.
So once we have the revenue streams, then better we should evaluate the energy storage over there. So, and that's the reason we keep on requesting and doing a lot of policy advocacy, keep on reaching DISCOMs to CRCs to bring out revenue streams where you can make energy storage a very viable assets.
Yeah, but in long term probably it should happen. Once the renewables penetration actually increases, we have already seen a decent amount. There are some studies going on where they are saying it gradually, once the exchange participation also increases. We are currently at 7%. The expectation is by 2020, not expectation, that's the aspiration, by 2024, the draft policy says it should be around 25%. Even if you are somewhere around it, once this participation increases and renewable penetration also increases, the difference between, if the prices delta keeps on increasing, that's the expectation, that in the morning hours the price will reduce and the evening peak or the morning peak, the price will be high. So as long as storage gives that kind of, fits in that delta, it should make sense, definitely. Then there is no doubt.
And I would also like to add, one thing is, if you want a premium service, you need to be ready to pay a premium tariff for it, right?
Which is unfortunately the difficult part for us. Renewables came only because it came to 2 rupees.
I have a question for everyone actually. Does anybody anticipate that as we move forward, and to Ravi's point, by 2024, almost 20-25% of exchange-based transactions, right, for the overall power, and as storage kicks in and renewable capacity is on its way to 450 gigawatt, right? Do we imagine or anticipate a scenario that during the daytime, the cost of solar on the exchange will actually fall down to zero? Right? I mean,
Sai, you want to take that?
Anyone.
Cost of solar, anyway, now, if you just try to look at the numbers till Q1 of...
I'm sorry, not the cost, the price of solar.
Yeah.
The price of solar will fall down to zero. But nevertheless, cost is also an interesting question, right?
Till Q1 of 2022, definitely there are certain possibilities for that. But after Q1, you very well know the challenges which are prevailing in the market. But just apart, looking at the price of solar, on the fronts of the capacity, whatever is getting added to Indian market, So it's going to take some more time to see these particular prices of getting down to decimal numbers, but not zero.
Again, I think you're talking about cost, not price.
It's more.
I think you're looking at from a supply chain.
So I will talk about the second point first. You are asking whether we will reach 25% of share or not. So, yeah, that's an aspirational target. Yeah, but all the directional policy directions which government is saying, the only single thing which can probably change that is implementation of MBED, market-based economic dispatch. Once that comes, it's just a matter of a day if that gets implemented, because just NTPC generation plants getting implemented will immediately shift the volumes if embed gets implemented. And forget embed, even if embed doesn't happen, there will be definitely increase in volumes, but probably with some other initiatives. All the initiatives which government has been taking, we talked offline also on this, that whether it's ancillary markets, whether it's real-time market, whether it's green markets, the common policy, and if you can see a common thread, it's to increase choice, as you said, choice of discoms to reduce that long commitment. So that's the intent probably. I may not be able to say 25% by 2025, but probably sometime sooner.
Okay. Thank you, Ravi. So we are coming to an end of the session. Very happy to have a few questions from the audience. If you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand and somebody will hopefully come to you with a mic. But there is, again, it's not just storage and technology based. I think it's pretty clear that we need more flexibility in the system. We need more market instruments. We need more ancillary services. And we possibly need a carrot and stick approach with the discoms to sensitize them and to kind of bring them to the fore and make sure that there is a takeoff in some of these alternate tender designs and technology solutions. So with that, I'd like to thank all my panelists. Thank you very much for your time and insightful comments. Thank you so much. I hope you found the session as useful and interesting as I did, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Bye.